and CUNY Graduate Center of Anthropology. This is a very rich background of our keynote speaker. He recounts his findings through books, articles, policy briefs, editorial notes, films, sculptures, teaching, and many more. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker this morning is Professor Jesse Ribot of the American University, Washington, D.C. And he's joining us virtually. A round of applause for Professor Ribot. And I'm hopeful that everything is set for him. So Professor Ribot, your audience are all set to hear you. Thank you.
Good day, Kumasi, and I am so honored. Thank you for the generous introduction. I'm honored to be speaking to the Kunst School of Business, to the International Sustainability Conference, and I really want to thank Ajay for this invitation. I wish I could be there. Instead, I am speaking from, unfortunately, the fascist-occupied United States of America, but I'm speaking actually from a place of hope, great hope. Zoran Mamdani was just elected in New York City. This is the son of the great Mahmoud Mamdani, the great Africanist scholar, and I think he gives us all a lot of hope. I'm glad to be speaking today, and I hope you can all hear me. Let me know if you can't. I'm very glad to be speaking to a business school, as this talk that I'm giving, and I'm going to stop the share so that you can see me. This talk is about business as usual. That is, elite capture of markets at the expense of producers, farmers in this case. This situation is not sustainable, not for security, not for well-being. It is not sustainable if we are to reduce vulnerability to loss and damages, or to hunger and famine in the face of climate variability or change. My talk today, it's a work in progress. And you've been given the title, Market Grabbing as a Key Cause of Hunger in the Sahel, toward Transformative Adaptive Response. I am actually hopeful from my research that we can and we must end seasonal hunger by mobilizing farmers to fight for better terms of exchange and to integrate markets vertically. I'll argue, based on research that I've done in Senegal over the last 40 years, that the hungry season is not inevitable. This season, the months before each harvest, that is when farm families run out of food, is not a byproduct of poverty. It is the product of captured markets. It is what I call a product of market grabbing. And it's market grabbing by merchants. But these markets are not just grabbed and taken. They are grabbed and managed for profit and managed to avoid politically fraught crises like famine. Land grabbing has gained a lot of attention in scholarship. You've all heard about land grabbing. It's a tragic expropriation that leaves a lot of farmers impoverished, landless, as laborers in others' industrial farms. But where I work over the past 40 years in Tambacounda region of eastern Senegal, land is not worth a hell of a lot. These are dry lands. Nobody is grabbing it. Yet in Tambacounda, people live under a system that takes all of their earnings and leaves them hungry every single year. Indeed, land grabbing is, I would argue, trivial in comparison to market grabbing. Not just in Senegal, not just in the dry lands, but everywhere, globally. Every year, farmers in Senegal, the case that I'm looking at, experience a hungry season of 1 to 3 months prior to each harvest, during which they cannot feed their families. 25% of the children under 5 experience stunting. This dates back to the pre-colonial period, that is, the concessionary period. It does not look like it dates back before that. In years with good harvests in Senegal, prices tumble, they drop. Farmers are left without sufficient income. This looks like a normally functioning market. I would argue it is not. In bad years, prices rise, but they are still left without sufficient income. This is not so totally surprising, but I'm going to ask the question, why? Why is there persistent hunger in good and in bad years? It's not the typical market answer or neoclassical economic answer. Experts in Senegal, at the FAO, World Bank, the now defunct USAID, various government agencies and NGOs tell me that, it's due to low productivity. It's due to climate change and land degradation. It's due to crop loss. It's inadequate storage. But it is none of these. These may contribute, but they cannot explain the persistence of a hungry season for the living memory of almost all farmers. Typical explanations just don't fly. The low productivity one, that is nonsense. Production in this region is increasing steadily and keeping up with population over the past 3 decades. Despite increasing production today, undernourishment is rising rapidly. They say it's due to climate change. Climate change is not the cause, since rains and harvests have been increasing in the Sahel over the past 20 years. Land degradation is simply not sufficient to explain hunger, and it is certainly not to explain, it doesn't help in explaining why production is increasing. Crop loss is just not sufficient to explain hunger, and inadequate storage is also not sufficient to explain this situation. There are indeed some indicators that the causes of hunger are located elsewhere, in price fixing, or the setting of low farm gate prices by merchants. These indicators are pretty simple. A divergence between rural and urban prices, making for big merchant margins. A divergence between domestic and international prices, producing big exporter margins and profits. It is indicated as well by low income, regardless of harvest, even when international prices are high. It is indicated by highly visible practices of price setting by merchants. We can actually observe it happening, and I'll get into that later. All these add up to high merchant profits and farmer impoverishment. Pope Francis had it right when he said, quote, "The land of the southern poor is rich and mostly unpolluted, yet access to ownership of goods and resources for meeting vital needs is inhibited by a system of commercial relations and ownership which is structurally perverse." Those are the words of Pope Francis. In eastern Senegal, I will describe the nature of this structural perversity. And I believe this structural perversity extends to all of Senegal, all of West Africa, all of Africa, and to much of the developing nations of Asia and Latin America, and certainly parts of the United States and other developed nations. The question is, what is this structural perversity? And I will tell you that it is market grabbing. It is a system in which merchants purchase agricultural products at derisively low prices. They sell them at higher prices. They reap enormous benefits, profits. Intermediaries are getting wealthy while farmers remain poor. Farmers cannot retain the wealth they produce. It is skimmed off through price fixing by monopsony and oligopsony buyers. In the 1980s, Amartya Sen, the economist, gave us an interesting explanation for hunger. He told us free markets allocate wealth away from the hungry. Free markets result in hunger and famine. And that's pretty simple. The poor don't have effective demand. The hungry don't have effective demand. I am arguing that what we have are not free markets, despite the efforts of structural adjustment since the 1990s. We have captured markets, and captured markets do an even more efficient job than free markets of allocating food away from the hungry. Captured markets allow hunger. They do it while avoiding famine. And that means they avoid crisis. Sen's free markets cause hunger and famine. Today's captured markets via market grabbing cause hunger but avoid famine. That is managed hunger. It is a managed system in which hunger is maintained, prices are kept below subsistence in good and bad years, but famine is avoided, as famine is politically untenable. So it must be avoided. Nobody wants famine. It is a shame and a scandal that makes political heads roll. Hunger, however, is seen as backdrop, almost a normal background condition. It's maintained, keeping profits up for merchants. Today, I'll present cases of market grabbing in peanuts, bananas, cotton, and charcoal in the Tambacounda region of Senegal. These will show how the mechanisms of market grabbing are different in each sector. The result, however, is the same: prices below subsistence and wealthy intermediaries. I'll then come back to conclude this problem actually requires farmers, associations, cooperatives, and unions to understand the problem through analysis, to organize, and to take back their markets. So let me share again my slides with you and go through a little bit of this. I don't have it in full mode. Anyway, the place that I work is in eastern Senegal, the Tambacounda region, dry land area, rain-fed agriculture. And as I mentioned earlier, land grabbing gets a lot of attention, but I'm going to talk about market grabbing. Market grabbing in peanuts, bananas, cotton, and charcoal in Tambacounda. In the peanut arena, what I am seeing is that this is a rain-fed crop for export and foreign exchange, producing oil. It is monopolized basically because it is state-owned purchasing and processing for oil. The oil industry is not entirely state-owned, but the purchasing prices are fixed by the state. A lot has changed in this industry. When the Chinese came in to buy peanuts, the prices did go way up. But then the Chinese got kicked out. But a lot is changing, and there is some hope. We could talk about that. What you have in the end, though, is low prices and a very pronounced hungry season in bananas. In cotton, in peanuts, A friend of mine wrote a piece on Ivory Coast called Peanuts for Cashews, showing pretty much the same thing in the cashew industry. For bananas in Senegal, these are irrigated. They're sold domestically. The company, the biggest landowner, is a guy named Monsieur Sahel, and he owns a company called Sahel Banana. What he does to capture the market is very different. It's not price fixing in the same way. He has refrigeration trucks, and he monopolizes cold storage in Dakar. At the beginning of each season, he takes his own 40% of the bananas to the market, and he sells it in Dakar. Comes back, tells the rest of the banana producers, you want to sell your bananas? You can sell your bananas. You are going to sell them to me at this low price that I'm offering you, or they will sit here and rot. He has the only refrigeration trucks, and he has the only storage. There is a cooperative now organizing that is considering purchasing refrigeration trucks and cold storage. In the end, prices are below subsistence in this industry, and there is a hungry season. The small producers experience it, but also Saul's banana workers, the workers on his farms, are paid so low that they also have a hungry season. In cotton, this guy, I liked his t-shirt. This industry is a monopoly industry by one single buyer soda tax. Cotton is a rain-fed crop for export, foreign exchange. You get fixed prices by this monopsony. And basically, there's also an interlocking credit labor set of arrangements in which the farmers take loans they get advances on equipment, seed, fertilizer, pesticide, and then when it's time to sell, they must sell it back to the company at prices from which those things are all subtracted and they end up in debt. It is even worse than that. When they sell their cotton, they're given a receipt. And at the end of the season, after all the cotton has been taken by the factory comes back and tells the farmers how much they're going to get paid. They set the price based on the industry-wide harvest. After the harvest,